So I am Guerschmide Saint-Ange. I'm the COO at NACSA, but given that wonderful activity, I'm also going to share that I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from East New York, Brooklyn. I am a Black woman, and I am a mom and a wife.
Buenos dias. My name is Tricia Noyola. I'm a Leo. I enjoy.
Amen, Tricia. I knew I liked you, girl.
Hey, thanks. I like long walks on the beach. I am originally from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. So if you go as far south in the United States as you can go, that is my home. And I lived my life on both sides, on the U.S. and on the Mexico side, and I identify equally with both. I am an adoptive mom of 4 incredible kids, and I have 5 animals, and so my life at home is total chaos. And I am CEO of Rocky Mountain Prep, so I run a network of 12 charter schools in Denver and Aurora.
Great.
Do you also identify as busy?
Yes. And highly favored of the Lord. Okay. Well, let's just jump right on in. Thank you both for sharing so much about yourselves. And when you think about your role as a current school leader, a former school leader, a former authorizer, but also as a parent, right? Where do you see overlap in your role?
All right. So I created the overlap pretty intentionally because I knew that I wanted to be a school leader for a long time. So of a charter school. So I became an authorizer so that I could better understand accountability. And because I was trained as a pedagogue, but I didn't quite understand the other side of what it means to run a charter school. So I was an authorizer for many years. But I had 2 criteria for being a school leader. And that was number 1, it had to be in a community that I cared about, a community that I was from. So my school was in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And number 2, my daughter had to attend the school. So for me, it was a turnaround school. So the stakes were already high. But by putting my daughter in that school, the stakes were also very personal. So I made every decision with all 3 of those lenses, the lens of being an authorizer, the lens of being a school leader, but also being a parent. So when I made a decision, I wasn't just thinking about, is this good for kids? Is this good for my kid? Would I want this for my child? Because she's going to experience this pretty soon. So there was overlap all the time. And particularly during the pandemic, where as we were making decisions, sometimes hour by hour, I was constantly thinking about how is this impacting my family and thereby affecting the community of families that I was serving. So the overlap was everywhere. Yeah.
Beautifully said. I consider being a mom my superpower as it relates to my job as a CEO.
I love that.
So it was really interesting because as a school leader, I led a school in the community that I am from. So I never had, quite honestly, the disconnect that I see too often happens in the charter sector of running schools where we might not have deep roots and deep connections. I had no such disconnect. Many of those people were related to me in some form or fashion, or my husband. And so the level of responsibility I felt was incredibly intense to getting it right. And then, when I became a mom, a lot of people told me, oh, you'll become softer, you'll become less intense. The opposite happened. What I became acutely aware of is what it felt like to sit on the other side of the table and to realize that all the power that I thought I had none as it related to entrusting everyone that was going to work with my kids, 2 of whom have significant special needs, that I had to put all my trust and faith in somebody else. And sitting on the other side of the IEP table taught me a lot about what needed to be different in all of my schools, what needed to be different in all of my classrooms, and quite honestly made me more bullish on the ideas that I had before and give even less of a hoot about, what the perception was going to be, because I deeply understood the impact that it was having in my own home. And I realized that my identity as a mother and my experience as a mother led me to actually make much better decisions than the ones that I was making before.
I love that, Tricia. I don't know that I had put it in those sorts of terms, but my superpower is being a mom. And that resonates for me, right? There isn't a decision that I make at NACSA that I'm not also thinking about my 3 children. So truly appreciate you sharing that. Gersh, can I ask you a follow-up on that? You talked about the decisions that you made. Would you mind sharing? I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but would you mind sharing a decision that you had to make where you were bringing all of Guerschmide Saint-Ange to that decision, whether that's as Carolyn's mom, that's as, school leader? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take an example from the pandemic. So we had 2 weeks. So March 13th happened. And then we had 2 weeks to get a plan to our authorizer of what like the learning was going to look like in this remote space, whether we were going to go asynchronous or on Zoom or what have you. So I'm sitting with the leadership team and we decide that, yes, there's a pandemic, but students need to learn. Like we're in an urgent space. Not only were we a turnaround, but our renewal was happening August of 2020. So a couple of months into the pandemic, we were going to have to go through renewal. So we needed to make urgent decisions about the quality of instruction that needed to happen despite this global pandemic. And we made the call, and albeit I think we made one out of like desperation and urgency. And we realized that we maybe went too gung-ho at first, because what I noticed was Carolyn was not making it. Carolyn is my daughter. And being on that Zoom all day as a kindergartner, I think she was, trying to learn in the middle of a global pandemic. And her dad was running like instruction with her and for her and technology. And then he gets COVID. I was like, every single one of my families are dealing with this right now. Right. So we made a different call, which was to split the day in half, to have instruction happening the first half of the day and the second half to have enrichment. This was like, you could join chess, you could join typing club, you could join a coding club. And it made our school day better. We ended up bringing a lot of that back into the building once we were back in. But that was one example of me recognizing how my decision impacted my family and then being able to say, oh, this is how other families are experiencing it too. We need to pivot and do something different. Yeah. So that's one example.
I love that example. And what it makes me think about is just want to hear from both of you. How can school leaders work with their authorizers, but also bring parents in to help make some of these decisions and to shape the experiences that kids are having in schools every day?
Yeah, so I hate the term parent engagement. Hate it. Don't use it. Parent engagement is a very passive term. And in this country, there are many things that pass for parent engagement that are not engaging, that do not actually, they're boring, they're awful, and they consistently put parents in service of the school. And that is not a paradigm I have any interest in. So at Rocky Mountain Prep, we talk about parent empowerment, not engagement. And so what parent empowerment means is like, you have an equal stake and seat at the table, that I am using my power, my privilege, my knowledge, and my resources, and I am actually giving them up and sharing them with you so that you don't have a different set of data or information. Example of this. So one of the first things that happened when I, moved to Denver is, and you gave me a microphone, so I get to say what I want.
Go on, girl. Go on.
No one was talking about how children were doing academically. Like I was looking under rocks. I was trying to figure out like who talks about this. And when I would talk to parents, they were confused. And by the way, national research supports this because most parents in the United States right now believe their child is performing on grade level. And what is it? 80% of them are not. So the emperor has no clothes. And so one of the first things I did is I said, so we're actually going to post right where every parent comes in. We're going to post every piece of data we have. And before the beginning of the school year, we are going to sit down and we're going to share, lift the curtain and talk about this is what all of this is what it means. And the reason why we're putting it in the area where I know every parent is going to come in and see it is because you have a right, you deserve to know, and there's no reason why you shouldn't. And listen, just that one decision, which in my mind, not controversial, very pretty milquetoast, you would have thought that I painted the sky purple and said what we were going to do is something totally different. So we got through that, but this is just to show you the paradigm in this country is broken, where we are still arguing over whether or not a parent has a fundamental right to know. Like we've messed up. And by the way, this is in the charter sector, okay? So I'm not talking about the traditional system because, again, we in the charter sector, we love to believe we're immune to all of the challenges, which is crap. And so we fundamentally have a misunderstanding of what this term engagement means, right? People talk ad nauseum about, well, we give out free coats and we have a food kitchen. Good for you. That's not power. That does not place power in somebody's hands. So not to poo-poo on the question, but I'm fundamentally disinterested in engagement. I'm interested in power, and I am interested in getting my kids and families the same power that those of us in this room have.
Yeah, I don't think you poo-pooed that question at all.
And can I add to that? Because when you said that, I was like, thank goodness somebody else understands this, because what we've been calling parent engagement is actually participation, right? It's like, did they come to parent-teacher conference? Did they come to the basketball game, right? It's like the most passive sort of thing you could think about. So again, I thank you for raising this, because parent engagement, regardless of what term you're going to use, right, whether it's empowerment or what have you, has to be undergirded by a fundamental belief that families have assets. And quite honestly, as educators, as authorizers, we don't respect families enough to actually have the mindset we need to ensure that their assets are part of the conversation. So same thing with the codes. Yes, meet the needs of families, but we are so oriented towards the deficits that families have. And we have this complex that we are the ones that are going to save the kids and save the families, when in fact, every family has an asset. Not just some families. Every family has assets. So the same way Elon said yesterday, we've evolved from that space of some students can learn, but some can't. Like now we're like, all students can learn. All families have assets, right? And so how do we leverage those assets to be a part of the conversation? This is what Tricia was saying about power, sharing the power with families. And as authorizers, the role is to find ways to capture that, not just measure it, because we have a tendency to, be a little compliance heavy. And so then it becomes a checking the box of, did you do the thing, right? And it's no longer authentic. So authorizers have a responsibility to find ways to capture how schools are not empowering families because they have power, but inviting that power into the school community.
Let me push on that a little bit, because I feel like something I've heard it here today or this week, I've heard it a lot of places, is that authorizers are unsure how or what their role should be in engaging families. And it's gone so far as I've heard some people say, well, that's just not my job. That's just not my role. When I was a school leader, I know that's not true because when it was time for a school to close, that the authorizer was there engaging families, so, but I have to believe that can't be the only time that an authorizer is partnering with school leaders and their families, right, to empower them. This can be for either of you, but Gersh, you just spoke about this, is like, what does that look like? Like if we can vision that, what does that look like when authorizers are present with and partnering with their schools and with their families?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's why we are in this conundrum, is that we don't know. We have the answer, like the answer's in the room, but we haven't yet had the bold conversations about moving away from passive engagement to what real empowerment looks like, because we're afraid to give power to family or to have them access their power, right? We almost actively work against parents showing up at the schoolhouse and engaging in powerful action at the
I'm sorry, did you say the schoolhouse?
I did.
You know I like to say the schoolhouse.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we there is a fear there because for lots of reasons, right? For economic reasons, for racial reasons, right? There are lots of reasons we are afraid of families and what they might say or what they might do. And until we move away from that fear and lean into having a deep respect for families, it's going to be a hard conversation to have to start to vision that, because we are not addressing or acknowledging the lack of respect and the deep fear that we have of families.
Mm-hmm. Not an authorizing expert, but even in the example you gave, which is, when a school is closing or when it's time for a school to close, even that paradigm suggests that the only time in which we are engaging families right now is when a decision's already been made, or in when we want to at times manipulate them into doing something for us and our sector. So part of what makes me uncomfortable, right, is we talk a lot right now in the charter world, like parent advocacy is a very sexy term, right? But from what I can tell, what it most often means is putting parents on buses to do our job. Sorry, you gave me a microphone. To be our lobbyists, right? Like, yay, you advocated for me. And so even in that paradigm, it is still, we involve parents to my ends, to my aims. So what would it look like if parents were actually engaged in every step of the process? We wouldn't need to put them on a bus to show up at the end. That they would actually be a meaningful part of every process, and not just to say we had the community meeting where everybody yelled and got upset over the thing that we already said we were going to do, but rather there was a meaningful way to include family voice in a way that makes sense, right? Because I also don't like when my opinion is asked of me and I'm like, you actually didn't want to hear anything I said. But it would look that way at every part of the process. And parent advocacy would actually mean that we were sitting down with parents and asking, what is actually most important to you? What is it that you care the most about? What is it that's keeping you up at night? And quite honestly, there's a ton of intersection between what we as the authorizers or as the networks are keeping us up at night, but that's just a different way to approach it versus you are the vehicle by which I'm going to get what I want done.
That's right.
You
That's
got us
right.
fired up, Courtney.
And ready to go.
Because what you just
you going
hit
back on the mic.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Because what you just raised is such an important point, is that we make a decision as authorizers or as school leaders, and then we get buy-in, right? And we think we're doing a great thing by talking about we want to go get buy-in.
That's right.
But what would it look like if we actually let families shape what is the problem we're even trying to solve, right? Like, we decide what the problem is. We decide, like, just like the example I gave earlier of like, oh, there's a global pandemic, but kids need to still learn how to read. I need to solve this problem. And then the impact of that was kids and families really could not deeply engage in that. What would it have looked like if I went through the process of telling my authorizer, there's a global pandemic, I need more than 2 weeks because I have to talk to my families and see what is the problem we're trying to solve and what other problems might emerge if I try to go in this particular direction. But that is not a frame of thinking that is popular or that is ubiquitous. It's more likely that we will make a decision, we will define the problem, we will make the decision, and then we'll say, how do we get families to buy into what we already have decided?
I don't even want to go to my next question. That's so true. Like, we not only are coming up with the problem, like that right there, like I can't move past that. Like, we're not really understanding the problem. Whew, thank you for sharing that. I feel like something else that I have heard, of course not from anybody in this room, there are authorizers that have not stepped foot in a school. We'll leave that topic for a different day. But Tricia, take us inside of your school, okay? On a previous episode of our podcast, I loved hearing you talk about the tough love that you exhibit. Just take us inside of your school and tell us what that looks like. I loved hearing you talk about like how kids are doing was right there when you walked in the door. Just take us into your school. What does that look like? What is parent empowerment? How is it showing up at your school?
Yeah, so Rocky Mountain Prep is amazing. And it's the greatest honor of my life outside of parenting my kids to lead this network. And we have two pillars, rigor and love. And when I first came to the network in 2021, we were getting clear on what rigor meant, but we were very confused about the love. And, as a Mexican mother, love means something very different to me than it might mean to many other people. Meaning, I love my kids. I love them so much. I want them to act right all the time.
All the time.
All
Preach.
the time. And I love them so much. I see it as my job and responsibility to prepare them to live in the world without me. Yes. And because of my life experiences, because of my identity, I know, even with all the privilege that I have, I know the challenges that I have faced. And so it is my responsibility too, as their mother, to not be ignorant to the way that the world sees us and to not prepare them for that in a way that is loving, but is very culturally responsive to who we are. And my kids love to update me too on the expectations of other parents. And I'm like, and I don't care because we're Mexican and it's different. We have a different idea of how we do things here. So anyways, I approach running my schools like a Mexican mother because that's all I am. Yes. I don't know who else to be, which means love means I'm going to love you through no matter what you have done or what is happening, but I'm going to demand better. And so I had a lot of teachers who believed it was loving at the time, motivated by good things, who believed it was loving to say, oh, it's okay that you didn't do this thing. Oh, it's okay that you want to, run around in the back of the class while we're doing our numbers. Oh, it's okay, because that's love. So I had to recontextualize. Let me give you a different definition
Mhm.
of love.
Mhm.
And particularly when we're working with a lot of young educators who are not parents themselves, that is different. Helping them understand what it means, particularly in homes and communities of color. This word love might mean something different than it means, in suburban Wisconsin. Okay. So one, it was like norming on that definition. And two, showing them that through deep love, you can demand more. Because we love our kids to the ends of the earth, we will say, you're going to do it again. Because we deeply love and respect our children as autonomous, beautiful people, there's nothing wrong with our kids. We can say, I can see you gave some effort. I think you've got more in you. Do it again. Or that wasn't it. I saw that you did this, but we give our kids very direct feedback. And the first time I modeled this for people, we're like, oh my gosh. And I said, listen, try it, right? Try it. If it is coming from a place of love, it, like in any relationship, it will make it stronger. Now, if you've got deficit mindsets, if you've got weird, racist, sexist idea, well, no, it's going to go horrible. And that's because your mind isn't right. So that has nothing to do with giving that feedback. So to put it, when you walk through my schools, you will see children talking really clearly about, this is my goal. This is where I'm at. This is what I need to do. You will see kids as young as 3 and 4 years old be able to articulate to you, this is what I'm working towards, and here's why it matters. And here's why I'm doing right here matters to the goal that I have for my life. You will see adults being very silly, very animated with kids, but talking clearly to children and telling them, what they need to hear. And we do not shy away from really ambitious academic goals. I don't know where the high expectations fell off the truck in the charter sector, y'all, but we got to get it back on the truck because we have lost a ton of our competitive advantage. The number one reason why parents are seeking out my schools is because they want their kids to be successful. That's it. They're not sending us for our, grand ideas on history like that. That's not what's happening. So I also think oftentimes we get very confused as to why parents are sending us their best and their kids are their best, and what it is, the goals that they have for their kids. For example, this whole debate we're having right now, is it college? Is it career? Like we need to choose between one of the two, which is weird. None of us in this room chose between the two. It wasn't confusing. It's not confusing to our parents either. We have just made it confusing with our myopic didactic thinking. And so fundamentally, we've spent a lot of time in relationship with our families, deeply understanding what it is they want, what their expectations are as us, and then co-creating what are each of our roles in this equation. So we just have a fundamentally different view of what it means to be an RMP family. And just case in point, I'm not going to say where I was at a few weeks ago, but I heard a chartered leader stand up and say, well, a challenge we have to overcome is that 70% of our kids are multilanguage learners. And I girded my loins and hung on to my chair and tried really hard to not jump out of my seat and throw off my hoops. Okay? Because one, you're talking about me, so stop. Two, that's not a problem to overcome. 3, you just told me everything I need to know about your parent engagement strategy right there from that comment. So it's also about how is it, to the point that was so beautifully made, what are the assets? Do we even think the communities we're working in have any assets, right? That's step 1. 2, can you name them? Right? So I'm going to ask you, and I'm really curious as to what you might say, because sometimes I hear whack, racist, weird things. And so that's not it. And 3, then how are you in partnership leveraging those? So if you're telling me that, strong, faith and home connection is an asset in your community, what does that look like in your school? what are you actually doing with that? Because I think we pay a lot of lip service, but then no one does anything. So I don't think you actually think that's an asset. So we've got a lot of work to do at RMP. I don't want to say we're perfect. We're far from it. And the conversations we have about families at RMP are just very different than what I hear broadly in the sector.
Yeah. I think we can take the offering and give the benediction and go on home after that. Something you said that I'm going to turn it over for audience questions here, but I wonder what it would look like if authorizers also embraced this pillar of love. Like, if we were embracing love the way that I'm not a Mexican mama, but I'm a Black mama, and I'd be telling my kids sit down and hush. That's love, because I love them. I wonder what it would look like if, as authorizers, when we talk about accountability, what it would look like if we did it from a pillar of love.
It would sound like what Tricia was talking about instead of compliance. Like, typically when we talk about accountability, what we mean is compliance, right? But if we applied love, then it would look like, we want this school to get better. We're not just waiting to see when it's time to close you. We want you to get better. Accountability looks like us partnering together for you to get better, not just be waiting for when it's time for you to close. And then I'll go and see about your parents.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Thank you both. I don't want to hog all the question asking here. Are there other questions that folks have for Gersh or for Tricia as you're thinking about parent empowerment and what that might look like for your schools and your families? So the question is, how do we meet parents where they are, right? Parents are busy. Parents have different levels of engagement already, and even philosophy, right? Like, what does parent empowerment look like when you need to meet different parent needs, right? Where they are.
We have some transferable skills in this area, right? And what we talk about is differentiation for students, right? And we can apply that same skill to families, where we can differentiate what engagement can look like. So for that busy parent, so I'll use myself as an example. I consider myself a busy parent, and the principal at my daughter's school knows that I'm not going to show up to every donuts with the dean, right? That's not the appropriate way to engage me. However, when she has a question about a mandate from her authorizer, she calls me, right? And because she knows that I have expertise in that area. But the trick is, she knows that I have expertise in that area. So the number one thing is to figure out what assets your families have to begin with, so that we can start creating plans on different ways to engage those families. They already have power, so we're not empowering them, right? But how do we allow them to access different points of the school and not only value FaceTime, not only value when they show up to the school? And I understand the helicopter parent piece. And when you dig into that, a lot of that is about a lack of trust in the schooling institution, which makes them feel like, if I'm not here every day, my child is going to get harmed or my child is going to be forgotten. So you're going to see my face every single day, because that's my core fear. So it's not just meeting parents where they are, it's like getting to know the families and what they deeply care about, and creating the space for them to be able to access the school in the myriad ways that they can.
Love that. And I need a better word than empowerment, because you're right. I haven't found one. Power sharing. I don't know. This is to your question. Two things. One is, before school year ever launches, so before we're in the heat of it, it is really important at Rocky Mountain Prep that we have an opportunity to sit down with each family. And that sit down could be a phone call. That sit down might be, we come to your house. That can look at a number of different ways. But shared relationships are based on me knowing your love language and you knowing mine. So how is it that you want to engage? How is it that you feel appreciated? What are the things that you care the most about? And so one, we make it our business to know that about every family before the school year ever starts. And so two, to that point, then when we're thinking about what are the assets, we already know all of that. And I know that this parent really cares about X, Y, and Z and wants to do that. The other thing I'll say is, I can say this now as a parent, y'all, most stuff we put on at school sucks. It really does. Okay. Donuts with the dean, most of the time sucks. Like, it does. I'm sorry. And I run schools, so I'll say it. Most of the time it's like, I'm eating like a stale pastry. I don't get to talk about anything I actually care about. And I'm just listening to all the other parents gripe. I don't want to do that. That's not a good use of my time. And so I think very often our parents are opting out of stuff that's just not that good. Right? And we're like, in order to care about your kid, you need to come eat the stale donut and listen to the same parent who's complained about the same thing 6,000 times. And so I think it behooves us to actually audit what it is we're offering and saying, well, the reason why people don't come is because it's not very good. How many times have you been to a meet the teacher night where you spend an hour in line to talk to somebody for 5 minutes about something that could have been read in an email? And so I think we need to fundamentally shift and think about, is what we're offering really high quality? And if it's not, how do we get high quality stuff? And if some parents, it really is their love language to eat the stale donut and talk, that's fine. Let them do that. But what are the other things then that is that segment we're just not speaking to, that's not actually meeting the need?
Any other questions? Okay.
One thing, because you mentioned about family empowerment, right? I wonder if, hearing everything that you're doing at Rocky Mountain Prep, sounds like family efficacy. You know, it's like you have an understanding of the behaviors that families need to participate in to then lead to student outcomes, right? So family behaviors leading to student outcomes, there's a through line for you. And so we believe in student efficacy. We believe in teacher efficacy. We know that the behaviors of teachers matter for student outcomes, right? And we need to adopt the belief that family behaviors lead to student outcomes.
I love watching y'all work like
My
through this. Like this is amazing. Okay. So the question is, teachers, they already got a lot on their plate, right? But they also have a very important role in all of this that we've been talking about today, right? Like, how do you empower them to be able to do that, knowing all the other stuff that they've got to do?
Yeah, so I will say that in general, I believe a lot of the things that we have asked teachers to do don't actually lead them to get better. And so my experience is not that teachers always feel overwhelmed. It is that they feel the things that they are being asked to do aren't actually producing better outcomes for children. And so some examples of this, TNTP has a really great study that shows that most professional development that teachers sit in is horrible. It does nothing. It does not improve student outcomes. It does not improve teacher practice. Yet, as a sector, and if you're an authorizer, just do a little survey. How many hours do your teachers spend in PD? And I'm going to use that term loosely, PD, every month, and just ask them, and what is it doing? Like, what did it do for you? You're going to get, depending on how comfortable they feel, some interesting responses. So one, I'd say the best medicine is prevention. So I'm relentless about, no, we're not going to do that. No, that's not happening. Oh, you have this really great thing you want to do. That sounds special. We're not doing that. Because I am by nature, by trade, a teacher. I do understand what it is like to have 8,000 different demands, and some bureaucrat in an office sitting somewhere thought something was super cool. So I'm not at all interested in that. 2 is teachers play a fundamental role, and I don't want to downplay it, but most of what I see about where this equation gets broken is at leadership, meaning it is the attitude, systems, and structures that school leaders actually have in place that either create the conditions for this just to feel like a natural part of a teacher's everyday job, or whether this feels like an additional spreadsheet, right, that I have to fill out. So in terms of like what I believe the unit of change is, it's actually, in my opinion, the school leader. So what are the systems and structures and barriers that are in place right now that either make it the behaviors we want easier or harder for teachers to do? And what I'd say is our schools have it as part of a natural fabric of the day. So it is not an additional ask for a beleaguered teacher. It is actually just a part of the way that we do business on an hourly, daily basis. And what I'd venture to guess is I've been in schools where it is an additional ask that is completely contingent upon whether or not the teacher can do it or not. And that is where I see most often that this gets broken. The other thing that I will say is cultural humility plays a huge role in whether or not this is affirming or whether it is damaging. And I use that term cultural humility very intentionally, right? Because it is impossible, well, I'll speak for myself, it is impossible for me to deeply understand and internalize every single culture on the face of the planet. I can't. I try, y'all, but I'm busy. And so I can't. But I can operate with cultural humility, which means that I am genuinely curious. I do not believe that my way is the only right way. I am aware of my own cultural values and the impact that that has on the way that I see situations. And so where I see leaders operating with deep cultural humility and modeling that for teachers, I see teachers that are acting in that way as well. So for example, I don't need my kids' teachers to have a deep understanding of Mexican American history. That'd be great. That'd be super cool. But listen, in Colorado, y'all, that ain't going to happen. Okay. So what I do need them, though, is to have humility to understand that their value system is not mine, is not the one I operate with in my home, and to be more curious about, well, what is it that you do? What are your beliefs, right? And where's their intersection? How can we match? So I think this concept of cultural humility is really important and is actually less overwhelming than telling teachers, you need to understand the 6,000 different cultures happening in your school, because they can't. The final thing I'll say on this, and I ride hardcore for my teachers, is we are asking I'm not. Some of y'all in this world, I'm not, are asking teachers to do what is not their expertise to do. We want them to be mental health counselors. We want them to be nurses. We want them to be curriculum designers. We want them to be firefighter. I mean, we got them doing all this stuff, and we're like, why wouldn't anyone want this job? Do you want that job? No. So I also think part of what the current generation is reacting to is, you all don't actually know what you want me to do, and I can't do any of it well. So what is this job? What is this about? And so at RMP, we're very intentional about what the job of the teacher is, what it is not. And that doesn't mean we don't care about mental health or firefighting or any of the other things. It's just we know what the unit of change is.
How does your leadership style dictate how you respond when a leader has different personal beliefs than you also have, but you think that they're the right? I mean, they're good for kids. They drive outcomes. Come on, I want to hear what y'all have.
Thank you for that question. I want to answer really honestly. Because up until this year, my kids have always been in my schools, my personal children. This year, they are not. The reason why, though, I deeply wish they were, and I believe in RMP now more than ever. The reason why they are not, though, is because by nature of the merger that I undertook, so I led a merger between my network and another network. And it was wild. And I made a lot of people really mad. I'm really good at that. I'm really good at making people mad. And so by nature of that, right, my kids actually became the target of harassment based on adults who were very mad at decisions that I were making. So I had never been in the situation before where I had to choose or decide to put my kids somewhere else for their own safety and for anonymity, right? And I went through a whole crisis of conscience because I've never been a chartered leader who had my kids somewhere else. And two, my kids didn't ask to be part of this journey. That actually I didn't ask to be part of this journey either, but they certainly did not sign up for this to be on mom's equity journey. And so I had to make the decision that was right for them. So I want to be honest in this space that my kids are not at my schools right now. And that is not my preference, nor was that my desire. And I think the way my own leadership has evolved, being put through this situation is, that line got crossed between, my job as a CEO and my job as a mother. And I had to choose in the moment which job was more important. And in that moment, I chose being a mom was more important to me. And y'all, people are just unhinged right now. I don't know what is in the water. I don't know. Someone smarter than me can figure that out. But being the only Latina leading a school system in a very white, male-dominated city made people just really mad on spec. And I wish I had thought more about what the impact might be. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I thought it important to be honest.
I'm really sorry that you had to make that decision because I also feel very deeply that school leaders should not be selling water that they're not willing to drink themselves. So as long as I'm a school leader, I would always have my daughter in my school. And the only reason she's not now is because I'm not leading a school. When you talk about values, that was something that was really important at the school that I was leading, knowing that I had like 40 teachers with 40 different value systems and what have you. What I try to avoid doing is putting my values on some sort of pedestal to say that my values are more important than the values that other people have at this school, but instead became really obsessed with the experience that the teachers were having. Because I think very rightly in the charter space, we're like, this is about kids, this is about kids. But at some point, we have to care about the adults. The adults were not okay. And I had the privilege of sitting not in the principal seat, but sitting in the executive director seat where I could focus on the adults and create a loving environment for teachers where there were high expectations and a lot of no nonsense leadership, but one where we were just dogged about seeing their humanity as people. Like I said, it was a turnaround situation. I did not come in and just fire everybody and start over, which is what a lot of turnaround folks do. I really looked at the trauma that school community had been through, and I led with love and a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion, and it made the difference. So they were able to leverage their very different values in ways that led to outcomes for kids because we cared about their humanity. And the NACSA folks who are in the room know that I am obsessed with their staff experience because somebody has to be caring for the adults who are also caring for kids. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's a little bit about my leadership orientation.
I hate this, but we have to end here. Thank you both so much for sharing so much of yourselves in this space. I hope you all are leaving with some takeaways and some connections that you can make to authorizing. I'm hearing new ways of maybe measuring some things. Like I just y'all's conversation together. This was just a really good conversation. So I want to thank you all for joining us as well. This will be our October. Okay, so this episode of the podcast comes out next week. Be sure to share it with all of your family and friends. Thank you, everybody.